Every great NBA career feels permanent while it's happening. The dominance stretches across seasons. The highlights replay so often they start to feel like they exist outside of time. And the names themselves become woven into the fabric of the sport. You stop imagining a version of the league where they aren't there anymore. But time doesn't care about any of that. Careers end, usually in ways that don't match the legend. Sometimes it happens on the biggest stage, with the entire basketball world watching. Other times it happens in half-empty arenas, on teams that weren't part of the original story, in bodies that have been ground down by 2 decades of punishment. The final game comes whether you're ready for it or not, and most of the time, nobody realizes it's the end until it's already over. This video is about those last games, 10 of the greatest players in basketball history, and the 10 vastly different ways their stories came to a close. Some got the farewell they earned, some had it stolen by injury, and others just faded away while the league stopped paying attention. But every single one of them, no matter how untouchable they seemed at their peak, had to face the same inevitable truth. Father Time remains undefeated. He doesn't negotiate. He doesn't care about how many championships you won or how many records you shattered or how physically dominant you were in your prime. He just keeps coming, and eventually he wins. And if you want to see just how unforgiving that truth can be, you can start with a man who spent nearly 2 decades being the most physically imposing force the NBA has ever seen. A player who won 4 championships by simply being bigger and stronger than anyone who tried to stop him. Someone who looked immune to the rules that applied to everyone else, until the day his body finally gave out and the league moved on without him. Shaquille O'Neal's last season in the NBA started with hope that probably shouldn't have existed. The Boston Celtics signed him in the summer of 2010, bringing him in to be the final piece for one more championship run. He was 38 years old. His knees had been falling apart for years. But this was the Celtics, the team with Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, and Ray Allen still in their primes. One more ring didn't feel impossible. Shaq played 37 games that season. He averaged 9 points and barely 5 rebounds. His body couldn't handle the workload anymore. The injury he suffered late in the year effectively ended any hope he had of contributing in the playoffs. But the Celtics kept him on the roster anyway, maybe out of respect, maybe because they truthfully thought that he could give them something if it came down to it. The playoffs started, and Shaq didn't play. The Celtics swept the Knicks in the first round without him, and then they moved on to face the Miami Heat in the second round. The team Shaq had won a championship with just 5 years earlier. He sat on the bench in a suit for games 1 and 2, and by game 3, with Boston down 0-2 and getting embarrassed at home, the coaching staff made a decision that felt more symbolic than strategic. They put Shaq in. The Celtics won game 3 97-81, keeping their season alive. Shaq played 8.5 minutes, scored 2 points, and grabbed 0 rebounds. It was his first action of the postseason, and he looked like a shell of what he used to be. Just 2 days later, Game 4 came, May 9th, 2011. The Heat were up 2-1 and looking to close out the series. Shaq checked in late in the game, playing just 4 minutes of garbage time. He didn't score. He didn't record an assist or even grab a rebound. The game went into overtime, and the Heat won 98-90. The series was effectively over. Shaq wouldn't play again. Boston got eliminated in Game 5, and by the time the offseason arrived, it was clear that his career was over. He announced his retirement on Twitter 3 weeks later, posting a short video with the caption,
"We did it. 19 years, baby. I want to thank you very much. That's why I'm telling you first. I'm about to retire. Love you."
And that was unfortunately it for Shaq. No farewell game, no standing ovation, no final moment where the crowd recognized what they were watching. Just 6 forgettable minutes in a game that didn't matter, on a team that was about to be eliminated, and a body that couldn't do the things that it used to. For a player who spent nearly 2 decades dominating the league in ways nobody had ever seen before, that ending just felt wrong. Shaq wasn't just big. He was destructive. He forced teams to change how they built their rosters just to have a chance at slowing him down. He won 3 straight finals MVPs with the Lakers, bulldozed his way to another championship in Miami, and made defending him feel impossible for an entire generation of centers. But by 2011, none of that mattered anymore. His knees were gone. The league had shifted towards smaller, faster lineups that didn't have room for a 7'1", 325-pound center who couldn't move laterally. The game had passed him by, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The last image of Shaq's career isn't a dunk that bent the rim or a championship trophy or even a speech. It was him sitting on the bench in Boston, watching a playoff series slip away, knowing his body couldn't give him one more run. And if you've spent any time on basketball Twitter, you've probably seen the picture. Shaq in a Celtics jersey, looking exhausted and out of place. It became the go-to image whenever someone calls a player washed. That's what his ending became, a meme. Shaq's story is what happens when the league decides it's over before you do. When the body quits and the game evolves past what made you great. When there's no ceremony, no final bow, and the realization months later that you already played your last game and didn't even know it. But some players don't let it happen that way. Some refuse to let the league write their ending for them, and they spend an entire season soaking in the love they built for over 2 decades. They get to cry on the court, hear the standing ovations in every building, and walk away knowing that they did it right. That's the kind of ending that almost every legend deserves, and one player in particular got exactly that. Dirk Nowitzki announced his retirement on April 9th, 2019, after the Dallas Mavericks' final home game of the season. He didn't hold a press conference beforehand. He didn't leak it to the media or build anticipation for weeks. He just played his last home game in Dallas, and when it was over, he sat courtside with tears streaming down his face while the entire arena gave him a standing ovation that lasted nearly 10 minutes.
But as you guys might expect, this was my last home game.
The 2018-19 season had been a farewell tour, even if Dirk never officially called it that. Everyone knew it was coming. He was 40 years old, his body was breaking down, and the Mavericks weren't competing for anything meaningful. But Dallas made sure his final year felt like a celebration. Every road game turned into a tribute. Opposing teams played highlight videos before tip-off. Legends like Dwyane Wade and Vince Carter exchanged jerseys with him. The league understood what Dirk meant, and they made sure he felt it. But the real moment, the one that defined his entire ending, happened at home. April 9th. Mavericks versus Suns. Dallas wasn't making the playoffs. The game itself didn't matter in the standings, but the building was packed and everyone there understood what they were watching. Dirk played 33 minutes that night. He scored 30 points. He went 11 for 31 from the field, hitting 5 threes. At 40 years old, he reminded everyone why he spent 21 years terrorizing defenses with that one-legged fadeaway that nobody could ever figure out how to stop. After the game, Dirk gave a speech. He thanked the fans, the organization, his teammates, and of course, the city of Dallas. His voice cracked multiple times. He could barely get through it without breaking down. He told the crowd he never imagined spending his career all in one place, and that Dallas gave him everything, and that he wouldn't have traded for anything in the world.
But it's been an amazing ride, and thank you guys so much for coming out.
The entire arena was in tears. The very next day, Dirk played his actual last game. It was on the road in San Antonio, a place where he spent 2 decades battling Tim Duncan and the Spurs in some of the most brutal playoff wars the league has ever seen. The Spurs honored him before the game with a video tribute. Greg Popovich hugged him on the court. Even the San Antonio crowd, who had booed him for nearly 20 years, gave him a standing ovation. Dirk played 32 minutes. He scored 20 points and grabbed 10 rebounds, going 8 for 21 from the field. In his final NBA game, at 40 years old, playing significant minutes on the road, he still looked like the player who had redefined what a 7-footer could do.
They see Dirk up top, and Dirk over Eubanks, got it to go for the top of the key.
The Mavericks ended up losing 105-94, but it didn't matter. Dirk got to go out on his terms, surrounded by respect, in front of people who understood what he had given to the game. That's the difference between Dirk's ending and Shaq's. Dirk got to choose. He got to tell the world that it was time, and the world responded with gratitude instead of pity. He didn't fade away on a team that didn't want him anymore. He didn't limp off the court in garbage time wondering if that was it. He played 21 seasons for one franchise, won a championship that felt impossible, and left the game exactly the way he wanted to. But even perfect endings can't erase the years of wear that lead up to them. And for some legends, the body gave out long before the heart ever did. Larry Bird's last season in the NBA was defined by pain, not the emotional kind, the physical kind that made it hard to walk, hard to sleep, and eventually hard to justify staying on the court at all. By 1992, his back had deteriorated so badly that he could barely bend over to tie his shoes. He spent entire games laying on the bench between substitutions just to keep his spine from locking up. The Celtics were still competitive, still making playoff runs, but Bird was playing through agony that would have ended most careers years earlier. He had already considered retirement multiple times. The 1991 season had been brutal. He missed 22 games because of back problems, and when he did play, he looked like a shell of a player who had dominated the 1980s. But Larry Legend wasn't ready to walk away yet. He came back for one more year, hoping his body could hold together long enough to give Boston one more shot at a championship. And unfortunately for Bird, it couldn't. Quick side note, I know you hear every YouTuber say this, but 97% of you guys are not subscribed. So if you can just do me a huge favor, take 1 second out of your day and hit that sub button. My goal is 100,000 subs and I cannot do it without you. And if you're enjoying this video, you may as well drop a like, right? It helps me way more than you could think. And be sure to check out our podcast channel where we cover daily NBA news that's happening all season long. That channel will be linked down below, as well as our Discord server, Twitter, and Twitch stream, where we do these podcasts live at 9 a.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday. Let's get back to the video. The 1991-92 season was a struggle right from the beginning. Bird played 45 games, his lowest total in a non-injured season. He averaged 20 points, which sounds respectable until you remember that this was the exact guy who spent a decade as one of the most lethal scorers in basketball. His shooting was still there. His basketball IQ was still elite, but his body couldn't cooperate. He couldn't move the way he used to. Defensively, he was a liability. The Celtics made the playoffs anyway, because Bird was still Bird. And even at half speed, he could still hurt you. Boston faced the Pacers in the first round without Bird and swept them. Then they ran into the Cleveland Cavaliers in the second round and ended up losing in 7 games. And as for Larry Bird, he only played in 4 out of the 7 games in the series. His back pain was just too much. In his final game, he scored 12 points, grabbed 5 rebounds, and dished out 4 assists. Bird didn't officially announce his retirement until August, 3 months after that game. And by then, his back had gotten so bad that the doctors were telling him that he was going to risk permanent nerve damage if he kept playing. The decision wasn't really a decision at all. His body had made it for him.
Tonight, my basketball career is officially over, and I had a blast.
The cruel part about Bird's ending is that his mind never quit. He still saw the game better than almost anyone. He could still shoot. He still had the competitive fire that made him one of the greatest players in NBA history, but none of that mattered when his spine wouldn't let him move. He spent his final season playing in constant pain, knowing every game could be his last. And when it finally ended, it wasn't because he wanted to stop. It was because he physically couldn't continue. Some players, though, refuse to let their final game be defined on what they couldn't do anymore. Some find a way to leave on their own terms, not by playing through pain or fading quietly, but by reminding the world one last time exactly who they were at their best. And if there's one player who understood how to script a perfect ending, it was the Black Mamba. Kobe Bryant's last game was not just a basketball game. It was a performance, a final act in a career that always felt more like theater than sports. Kobe understood legacy in ways most players never do. He knew how stories get told, how moments get remembered. And he knew that if he was going to walk away from the game, he wasn't going to do it quietly. He was going to leave an image so perfect, so impossibly cinematic, that it would become part of the mythology he'd spent 20 years building. The date was April 13th, 2016. Staples Center, Lakers versus Jazz. Los Angeles wasn't making the playoffs. They had won 17 games all season, one of the worst records in franchise history. The roster was a collection of young players and role players who were never supposed to be playing alongside a legend in his final act. The building was packed with celebrities, former teammates, and fans who had spent 2 decades watching Kobe carry the Lakers through championships, heartbreak, and everything in between. Everyone knew what this was. They weren't there to watch a basketball game. They were there to witness the end of an era. Kobe had announced earlier in the season that this would be his final year. He didn't want a farewell tour in the traditional sense, but the league gave him one anyways. Every road game turned into a tribute. Arenas played highlight videos. Opposing players lined up to thank him. Everywhere Kobe went, people treated him like royalty, because that's what he had been for 20 years. The Black Mamba, the heir to Jordan, the player who refused to accept anything less than greatness, no matter how much it had costed him. But unfortunately, if you guys remember, that farewell tour was pretty hard to watch at times. Kobe's body was done. He had torn his Achilles in 2013, fractured his knee a year later, and spent the last few seasons playing through injuries that would have ended most careers. He wasn't the same player anymore. His shooting percentages were terrible. His athleticism was completely gone. Watching him struggle through games felt like watching someone refuse to accept reality. And there were moments where it seemed like his final season would be remembered more for his stubbornness than his greatness. But then came his final game. Kobe started off slow. He missed his first 5 shots. The Jazz had jumped out to an early lead. It looked like his final night might have been just another loss in a forgettable season. But then something shifted. Kobe started hitting shots. The crowd got louder. His teammates started feeding him the ball on every possession, understanding that this wasn't about winning a meaningless game in April. This was about giving Kobe one last moment. He scored 35 points in the second half, 23 points in the fourth quarter alone. The Lakers clawed back into the game, and with less than a minute left,
Bryant for 3. Gamer. Bryant on the move with the jumper. And the Lakers lead.
the building erupted. And he wasn't done just yet. He kept attacking, kept shooting, kept refusing to let that moment slip away. By the time the final buzzer sounded, Kobe had scored 60 points. 60 at 37 years old in his final NBA game on a torn up body that shouldn't have been able to do any of this. He delivered a performance that felt ripped straight out of a Hollywood script. He attempted 50 shots though. The Staples Center crowd lost their minds. And after the game, Kobe stood at center court exhausted and drenched in sweat, literally soaking in the moment. He grabbed the microphone and gave a short speech, ending with the words that would define his entire career.
Mamba out.
It was a perfect final act that reminded everyone why they had fallen in love with him in the first place. But Kobe had spent 20 years willing impossible things into existence, and on his final night, he did it one more time. He turned what could have been a sad, forgettable ending into something mythological, something that only added to the legend instead of diminishing it. In the years since, that final game has only grown in significance. We lost Kobe far too soon, and the pain of that loss still lingers for everyone who watched him play. But that night in April 2016 remains untouchable. It's the last image we have of him doing what he loved, in front of the fans who loved him, delivering one last moment of greatness that nobody saw coming. He scripted it, performed it, and walked away on his own terms. He reminded everyone that some legends don't fade. They burn brighter on the way out, leaving behind something so perfect that it became impossible to forget. Not every ending can be that cinematic, but some careers end with a different kind of poetry. One built not on spectacle, but on loyalty, consistency, and a refusal to ever beg for attention. Tim Duncan's last game happened on May 12, 2016, and most people didn't realize that it was even his last game until 4 months later when he quietly announced his retirement. No farewell tour, no emotional press conference, no standing ovations in every arena. He just played his final game in the second round of the playoffs against the Oklahoma City Thunder, and when it was over, he went home and decided that he was done. That's the most Tim Duncan thing imaginable. The 2015-16 season had been solid for the Spurs. They won 67 games, the second best record in the league, and Duncan was still contributing even at 39 years old. He wasn't the dominant force that he'd been for most of his career, but he was still steady, still reliable, still doing all the little things that made San Antonio one of the most consistent franchises in basketball. Greg Popovich had managed Duncan's minutes carefully all season long, limited him to just under 26 minutes per game to keep him fresh for the playoffs. And the playoffs started well. The Spurs swept the Grizzlies in the first round, and Duncan looked comfortable. Then they ran into the Thunder in the second round, and everything unfortunately fell apart. Oklahoma City was younger, faster, and more explosive. Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook were at their peak, and the Spurs just simply could not keep up. San Antonio lost the series in 6 games, and Duncan was unfortunately relatively quiet. In the final game, he played 34 minutes. In fact, he played all 12 minutes of the final fourth quarter, scored 19 points, grabbed 5 rebounds, and even swatted a shot. When the game ended, Duncan walked off the court with no indication that it was his last time doing so. There were no tears, no lingering moments, no acknowledgement that 19 years of dominance had just come to an end. He shook hands with his teammates, left the building, and that was it. The Spurs didn't even hold a press conference. Duncan didn't post anything on social media. He just disappeared into the offseason, the same way he had every other year. A couple weeks after that loss to the Thunder, the Spurs released a simple statement on July 11th. Tim Duncan was retiring. It was legit just a press release and a few quotes from Popovich about how much he meant to the franchise. Duncan himself barely said anything publicly. He had spent 19 years being the most unassuming superstar in basketball, and he ended up retiring the exact same way. We're talking about a man who won 5 NBA championships, 2 NBA MVP awards, and 15 All-Star appearances, and a spot on so many lists as the greatest power forward of all time. What makes Duncan's ending so fitting is that it perfectly encapsulates who he was as a player. He never needed the spotlight. He never chased attention or built a brand around himself. He just showed up, did the work, won 5 championships, and left without asking for an applause. His last game wasn't memorable because it wasn't supposed to be. Duncan didn't play basketball for the moments that would end up on SportsCenter. He played to win, and when his body couldn't help the Spurs win anymore, he walked away. There's something beautiful about that kind of ending. No dramatics, no forcing one last run when the body isn't capable, just a quiet acknowledgement that it's over, and the grace to step aside without making a scene. Most legends struggle with that. They hold on for too long, or they try to manufacture one perfect moment. Duncan just left. He reminded everyone that greatness doesn't always need a grand finale. But if Tim Duncan represents one of the quietest exits in NBA history, then the next player represents the exact opposite. A career that ended not once, not twice, but 3 separate times. And the third one, the actual final game, that's the one that nobody really talks about, even though it might be one of the most fascinating of them all. The first retirement came in 1993, right after winning his 3rd straight championship with the Bulls. Jordan was 30 years old, at the absolute peak of his powers, and he walked away. Not because his body was breaking down or because he couldn't compete anymore, but because his father had been taken too soon, and basketball just didn't feel the same to him anymore. His last game in that first run came on June 20th, 1993, in Phoenix during the finals. Jordan dropped 33 points, grabbed 7 rebounds, and closed out the Suns to win in 6 games for his 3rd ring and 3rd finals MVP. He left that game as the undisputed best player on the planet. He came back in 1995, played through the end of that season, then spent the next 3 years reminding everyone why he was the greatest of all time. The second retirement came in 1998 after the Bulls won their 6th championship. Game 6 of the finals in Utah. Jordan scored 45 points, hit the game-winning shot over Brian Russell with 5 seconds left, and walked off the court as a champion for the 6th time. That shot, that moment, that image of Jordan holding his follow-through while the Jazz crowd sat in stunned silence. It's one of the most iconic endings in sports history. It was perfect. It was poetic. It was everything a final game should be. And then 3 years later, Michael Jordan came back again. The Wizards years are the part of Jordan's career that people either just don't talk about or actively try to forget. He was 38 years old when he came out of retirement in 2001, joining a rebuilding Washington Wizards team. The idea was that he could mentor young players, help the franchise rebuild, and maybe squeeze out a few more competitive years before calling it quits for good. What actually happened was 2 seasons of Jordan trying to drag a mediocre roster into relevance while his body slowly gave out on him. He was still Michael Jordan, which meant he still had his moments. He averaged over 20 points per game in both seasons with the Wizards. He even dropped a 51-point game, which is absolutely absurd for someone his age. He had those games where he looked like his old self, where the footwork and the mid-range game were still there, where you could see flashes of the player who had dominated the league for over a decade. But those moments became rarer as the injuries piled up. His knees couldn't handle the workload anymore. The Wizards weren't good, and Jordan couldn't lift them into the playoffs no matter how hard he had tried. His actual last game came on April 16th, 2003, in Philadelphia against Allen Iverson and the 76ers. Jordan was 40 years old. The Wizards weren't making the playoffs. The season was already over, but the Wells Fargo Center was packed because everyone knew that this was it. Jordan had announced before the game that he was retiring for good this time, and Philadelphia wanted to give him a proper send-off. He played 28 minutes. He scored 15 points on 6 for 15 shooting. He grabbed 4 rebounds and dished out 4 assists. It wasn't the explosive highlight reel performance people hoped for, but it was respectable. Late in the game, with the Wizards down and the outcome already decided, the Sixers intentionally fouled Jordan to stop the clock. The entire Philadelphia crowd rose to their feet and gave him a standing ovation that lasted over a minute. Allen Iverson, Larry Brown, and the entire Sixers roster stood and applauded. Jordan, who was visibly emotional, acknowledged the crowd, stepped to the line, and knocked down both free throws. When the final buzzer sounded, Jordan walked off the court for the last time. This was a 40-year-old legend finishing a season on a losing team, getting the respect he had earned over 15 years of greatness. The Wizards lost 107-87. Jordan's final stat line was solid, but unremarkable. And that was it. The greatest player in basketball history retired for the 3rd and final time. Not with a bang, but with a quiet acknowledgement from a city that had watched him destroy their team for over a decade. The Wizards' years complicate Jordan's legacy in ways people don't like to admit. The first 2 retirements were perfect. Both ended with championships. Both left people wanting more. But the third one? That was messy. It showed that even Michael Jordan, the most competitive and transcendent player the game has ever seen, could not beat Father Time. His knees were shot. His explosiveness was gone.
He's back on the shelf again.
The league had moved on, and no amount of willpower could bring back what his body had lost. Jordan didn't come back to the Wizards because he needed the money or the attention. He came back because he genuinely loved the game, and he wasn't ready to let it go. And even though the ending wasn't cinematic, even though it didn't add another ring to his collection, it showed a side of Jordan that people rarely talked about. The side that valued playing basketball more than protecting a perfect legacy. The side that was willing to look mortal if it meant getting a few more years on the court. Most legends care too much about how their story ends. Jordan cared more about playing. And in a strange way, that 3rd retirement, the one that didn't fit neatly into the narrative, might be the most human moment of Michael Jordan's entire career. Not every player gets 3 chances to walk away, but the ones who do often find that the last ending, the one that doesn't get remembered as fondly, reveals more about who they really were than all the championships ever could. Some retirements, though, don't come from age or injury or even a loss of passion. Some happen because life forces the choice in ways nobody sees coming. The final game becomes something entirely different, a moment frozen in time before everything changed. Magic Johnson's career didn't end in the way anyone expected. It ended on November 7th, 1991, in a press conference at the Forum in Los Angeles, when Magic announced to the world that he had contracted HIV and was retiring from basketball immediately.
The HIV virus that I have attained, I will have to retire from the Lakers.
He was 32 years old, coming off of a season where he had just led the Lakers to the finals, and he was still one of the best players in the league. His last game before that announcement had come just 5 months earlier, on June 12, 1991, in the NBA Finals against the Chicago Bulls. Game 5 at the Great Western Forum. The Lakers lost that night, finishing a 4-1 series defeat to Michael Jordan's Bulls. Magic played well. He averaged almost 19 points and 12.5 assists throughout the entire series. But Chicago was just too good. Nobody watching that game knew it would be Magic's last for months. Nobody had any idea what was coming. The disease was still so misunderstood in 1991 that there were genuine fears about whether it was safe for him to be on the court with other players. Others didn't think that he'd live long enough to even try. But Magic wasn't done yet. 4 months later, he was voted into the 1992 All-Star Game by the fans, and the league decided to let him play. February 9th, 1992 in Orlando. It was one of the most emotional moments in NBA history. Magic checked into the game, and the entire arena erupted. Players on both teams embraced him. Isaiah Thomas, who was his longtime rival and close friend, hugged him before tip-off with tears in his eyes. For one night, basketball stopped being about competition and became about celebrating someone who wasn't supposed to be there anymore. Magic played 29 minutes. He scored 25 points, dished out 9 assists, and knocked down a three-pointer late in the game that brought the entire building to its feet. He won the All-Star Game MVP, and when the game ended, he stood at center court, surrounded by players who looked at him like he had just done something impossible. And in a way, he had. He had faced a diagnosis that was supposed to end everything, and he had come back, even if just for one night, to remind everyone that he was still Magic.
Maybe you'll see me back, maybe you won't, but I'll remember all these good times this afternoon. I'd like to thank you for sharing this with me. Thank you.
That All-Star Game felt like the perfect ending, a triumphant return, a celebration and a final moment in the spotlight before he had walked away. And for a while, it was. Magic stayed retired. He focused on advocacy, on educating people about his condition, on proving that the virus didn't have to be a death sentence. He became a symbol of resilience, and the basketball world moved on without him. But as y'all know, Magic just couldn't stay away. In 1996, nearly 5 years after his initial retirement, Magic announced that he was coming back to play for the Lakers again. That decision pretty much shocked everyone. The league had changed a lot in the years he'd been gone. The game was faster, more physical, and Magic was now 36 years old. But he wanted to prove something. He wanted to show that he could still play, that HIV hadn't taken away his ability to compete, and that he could finally walk away on his own terms.
Oh my! They're on their feet! Magic's first 2 points on the return!
The comeback didn't last long. Magic played 32 games during the 95-96 season. He averaged almost 15 points and 7 assists. Solid numbers for someone his age who has been away from the game for so many years. But it was clear that his body just wasn't what it used to be. The Lakers are mediocre, and Magic's presence wasn't enough to change that. By the end of the season, he had made his decision. He was retiring for good, not because of HIV, but because he had proven what he needed to prove. He played professional basketball at the highest level with his diagnosis. His actual final game came on May 2nd, 1996 in a first-round playoff series against the Houston Rockets. The Lakers lost the series in 4 games, and Magic's final performance wasn't spectacular. He played 30 minutes in Game 4, scored 8 points on 2 for 8 shooting, and added 5 rebounds and 5 assists. The Rockets ended up winning 102-94, and Magic's career was officially over without a storybook ending. Just a first-round playoff exit on a team that wasn't built to compete. But the significance of Magic's final game isn't about the stats or the outcome. It's about what it represents. He had retired in 1991 because the world told him he had to. He came back in 1996 because he refused to let the disease define him. His final game wasn't about chasing another ring or cementing his legacy. It was about playing basketball on his own terms, proving to himself and everyone else that this virus hadn't beaten him. The 1992 All-Star Game felt like the perfect farewell. The 1996 return felt unnecessary to some, almost like he was risking his health for something that didn't matter anymore. But to Magic, it mattered, and it mattered a lot. Most farewells are about the body giving out or the game passing you by. Magic's was about reclaiming control over a narrative that had been taken away from him. And in that sense, his final game, unremarkable as it was on the stat sheet, might be one of the most powerful endings in NBA history. And that's the beauty of all of this. Some endings matter because of what they represent, because of the fight it took just to get there. And then there's the rarest ending of them all, going out on top with a championship, proving one last time when it mattered most, nobody could defeat you. Bill Russell's last game came on May 5th, 1969, in Los Angeles during Game 7 of the NBA Finals. The Celtics were facing the Lakers, and Russell wasn't just playing, he was coaching. He had spent the previous 2 seasons as a player coach for Boston, the first black head coach in NBA history, leading the team while still being their most important defensive presence on the court. At 35 years old, his body was worn down from 13 seasons of relentless playoff battles, but his mind was still sharp, and his will to win hadn't diminished at all. The 1968-69 season had been a grind. The Celtics weren't the dominant force they had been for most of the decade. They finished 4th in the Eastern Division with a 48-34 record, and most people assumed that their dynasty was over. Russell was older, slower, and his offensive production had dropped to almost nothing. He averaged just 9 points per game that season, the lowest of his career. But defense and leadership don't show up in the box score, and Bill Russell still had plenty of both. Boston made it through the playoffs by sheer force of will. They beat the 76ers in the first round, then took down the Knicks in 6 games to reach the finals. Waiting for them were the Los Angeles Lakers, who had added Wilt Chamberlain to a roster that already featured Jerry West and Elgin Baylor. On paper, the Lakers should have destroyed them. But this was Bill Russell's Celtics, and they didn't lose in the finals.
We've done it before.
Game 7 was in Los Angeles, and the Forum was packed with Lakers fans who were convinced that this was finally their year. The game was tight the entire way. Neither team could pull away, and with less than a minute left, the Celtics were clinging to a 2-point lead. The Lakers had the ball, and the building was roaring. Jerry West missed a shot. Wilt grabbed the rebound but couldn't convert. The ball went back to West, who missed again. Bill Russell grabbed the rebound, and that was it. The Celtics ran out the clock and won 108-106. Bill Russell's final stat line was 6 points, 6 assists, and 21 rebounds. He barely scored, but it didn't matter. He had controlled the game defensively, out-rebounded Wilt Chamberlain in the biggest moment, and led the Celtics to their 11th championships in 13 years. When the final buzzer sounded, Russell walked off the court as a champion for the 11th time, and nobody knew it was his last game. He didn't announce his retirement until months later. He just quietly stepped away, having achieved everything there was to achieve. 11 championships, 5 MVPs, the greatest winner in basketball history. And his final act was beating the Lakers in a Game 7 of the finals, proving one last time that when it mattered most, nobody could outlast him. Bill Russell's ending is the rarest kind. He went out on top, not just winning, but winning the championship in the most dramatic way possible. There's something beautiful about Russell retiring without fanfare. He had spent 13 years being the backbone of the greatest dynasty in basketball, and when it was all over, he just walked away. No speeches, no emotional goodbyes, just the knowledge that he had done what no one else ever would, and that was more than enough. Rest in peace to arguably the greatest winner and one of the greatest centers the game has ever seen. Russell went out as a champion, but even legends who make it to the finals don't always get that perfect ending. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's last season in the NBA was a farewell tour before they were really a thing. The 1988-89 season marked his 20th year in the league, and everyone knew it would be his last. He was 41 years old at the start of the season, the oldest player in the NBA, and still contributing to a Lakers team that was trying to win back-to-back championships. Kareem wasn't the dominant force he had been for most of his career, but he was still Kareem. The skyhook still worked, the basketball IQ was still there, and the respect he commanded from every arena in the league was undeniable. The Lakers had won the championship the year before in 1988, and they were trying to repeat. Kareem's role had diminished significantly. He was averaging 10 points per game, playing fewer than 23 minutes a night, but he was still a presence. Every road game that season turned into a tribute. The league understood what Kareem had meant to basketball for 2 decades, and they made sure he felt it. Except for Detroit, who felt cheated because of that late game foul on Bill Laimbeer against Kareem Skyhook. The playoffs arrived and the Lakers looked like they still had one more run in them. They swept the Trailblazers in the first round, then the Sonics, and then the Suns. They couldn't be stopped. And somehow, against all odds, the 42-year-old Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was headed back to the NBA Finals. Waiting for them were the Detroit Pistons, the bad boy Pistons, younger, meaner, more physical than any team the Lakers had faced in years. Detroit had been knocking on the door for way too long, and this was finally their moment. They weren't going to let an aging Lakers squad stand in their way. The series started in Detroit, and the Pistons came out hungry. They won games 1 and 2 at the Palace of Auburn Hills, and the Lakers were down 0-2. By the time the series shifted back to Los Angeles for Game 3, the Pistons had all the momentum. They won that Game 2 going up 3-0 and putting the Lakers on the brink of elimination. Game 4 came on June 13th, 1989 at the Forum in Los Angeles. Detroit was 1 win away from their first ever championship. The Lakers crowd was hoping for a miracle, desperate to avoid the sweep, but the Pistons weren't letting up. Kareem played 29 minutes that night, knowing this was almost certainly his last game. He scored 7 points on 2 for 8 shooting and ended up grabbing only 3 rebounds. Late in the game, with the Lakers down and the outcome essentially decided, Kareem checked out for the final time. The Forum crowd rose to their feet, giving him a standing ovation that lasted over a minute. He acknowledged them, visibly emotional, knowing his 20-year career was coming to an end. The Lakers lost 105-97, and the Pistons celebrated their first championship on the Lakers' home floor. Kareem's career ended at the Forum, the building where he had won 5 championships, but this time, he just couldn't deliver one more miracle. He ended up retiring after that series. He had given 2 decades to the game, and there was nothing left to prove. The skyhook had taken him as far as it could, and when the body finally couldn't keep up, he accepted it and walked away. Kareem's ending wasn't what he wanted, but it was honest. He competed until the very end, played his final game in the finals while chasing one more ring, and left the game knowing he had done everything possible. His career ended with a loss at home, watching a new dynasty celebrate on his court, and somehow, that feels just as fitting as any perfect ending. And then there's the ending that combines all of this: the farewell tour, the respect, the perfect final moment, and complete control over when to say goodbye. Dwyane Wade's final season in the NBA was everything a player wished for. He announced before the 2018-19 season that this would be his final year, giving the league an entire season to honor him, and they did. Every arena he walked into became a celebration. Teams played tribute videos. Opponents gave him gifts. Fans who had booed him for years stood up and applauded. Wade had spent 16 years being one of the most electrifying players in basketball, and the league made sure he felt appreciated on his way out. The season itself was bittersweet. The Miami Heat weren't contending for a championship. Wade's role had been reduced to coming off the bench, mentoring younger players, and providing veteran leadership. He was 37 years old. His knees were worn down from years of acrobatic finishes and relentless drives to the basket. And he wasn't the explosive scorer he had been during his prime, but he could still have moments. There were games where he'd check in, drop 25 points, and remind everyone why he had been one of the most dangerous guards of his generation. Wade's farewell tour became iconic because of all the jersey swaps. After almost every road game, he'd exchange jerseys with an opposing player, LeBron James, Dirk Nowitzki, all legends who understood what Wade meant to the game and wanted to send them off the right way. The images of Wade holding up jerseys in opposing arenas became a reoccurring symbol throughout that season, a visual representation of respect he had earned over his 16 years. The Miami Heat made a late season push for the playoffs. It looked like Wade might get one more postseason run, but unfortunately for him, they fell just short. Wade's last home game came on April 9th, 2019, playing against the Philadelphia 76ers. He scored 30 points in a blowout win, and the Miami crowd gave him a 10-minute standing ovation. It was emotional, it was perfect, and it felt like the send-off he deserved.
That was tragic. Let's try it again.
But that wasn't technically his last game. The Heat had one more game left in the season, a road matchup against the Brooklyn Nets the following night, April 10th, 2019 in the Barclays Center. And somehow, Wade saved his best for last. He played 36 minutes that night. He scored 25 points, grabbed 11 rebounds, and dished out 10 assists. That's right, D-Wade finished off with a triple-double in his final NBA game. LeBron James, Chris Paul, and Carmelo Anthony were all sitting courtside, all of them there to watch their friend play one final time. The building was packed, and even though it was a road game, it felt like everyone in the arena understood what they were witnessing. Late in the game, with the Heat trailing and the outcome mostly decided, Wade got his 10th assist by finding Udonis Haslem for a basket. He was D-Wade's teammate for nearly 15 years, one of his closest friends in the NBA, and he finished the play that gave Wade his triple-double.
Wade gives it up. Haslem the bucket. Yes! Dwyane Wade, a triple-double in his final NBA game.
The moment was perfect. Wade didn't force it either. It just sort of happened. When the final buzzer sounded, the Nets won 113-94, but nobody cared about the score. Wade stood at center court with tears in his eyes while CP3, LeBron James, and Melo rushed onto the floor to embrace him. The entire arena gave him a standing ovation. Even in Brooklyn, even on the road, everyone stopped to honor what Wade had meant to the game. Wade's ending was unique because he got to control it from start to finish. He announced his plan to retire, gave the league a full season to honor him, and closed it out with a triple-double in his final game. Not many players get an ending like that. Most of them lose control of the narrative somewhere along the way. Injuries end up derailing them. Teams move on without them. The game passes them by before they're ready. But Wade controlled his exit. He decided when it was time. And when he finally walked off that court in Brooklyn, it was because he had chosen to. 3 championships, a finals MVP, 13 All-Star appearances, and most importantly, the love and respect of every city he played in. His final season wasn't about chasing stats or forcing one last playoff run. It was about gratitude, about acknowledging the fans who had supported him, the players who had competed against him, and the game that had given him everything. Some careers end with confusion, some end with heartbreak, some end quietly, and some end with celebration that lasts for months, but all of them end eventually. No matter how great the player, no matter how many championships they won, no matter how untouchable they seemed in their prime, Father Time doesn't negotiate. He doesn't care about legacy or loyalty or how many rings you won. He comes for everyone, and eventually, every legend has to walk off the court for the final time. Some go out like Shaq, forgotten in garbage time. Some go out like Bird, their bodies failing before their minds were ready. Some go out like Jordan, refusing to let go even when the game has already moved on. And some like Wade get to leave on their own terms, surrounded by love and gratitude. But no matter how it all ends, the final game is always the same. It's the moment when the story stops being written, when the highlights stop coming, when the crowd realizes they'll never see that player on a court again. These 10 legends gave everything to basketball. They changed the game, inspired millions, and left behind legacies that will never be forgotten. But in the end, they all had to face the same reality. The game moves on, time moves on, and no matter how great you were, you don't get to stay in the league forever. The last game comes for everyone. The only question is, what does it look like when it does? If you enjoyed, Please don't forget to drop a like, subscribe, and check out our podcast channel, Jay-Z Courtside, where we upload daily NBA content Monday through Friday. Oh, and you see the videos that are on the screen right now? Go check them out. I think you'll love them. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.